No mai haere mai to the Whāki podcast, which invites you and people from all walks of life to converse about various access to equity within the context of Aotearoa. We invite people like our beautiful guests today to share lived experiences in an effort to identify common threads within support systems, social networks, and knowledge that uplifts the collective human experience. Kelsey.
Kia ora. Our question this season is, what does equity and knowledge look like for various communities coexisting within one society? As tauiwi in Aotearoa, we recognise the mana whenua and kaitiaki of these lands. Maluseo and I have experienced most of our growth in the Waikato and want to honour Ngāti Hawa, Ngāti Mahana and Ngāti Wairere. We're grateful for the connections our whakapapa weave through for us to be able to connect and grow with community through the whākiu kaupapa. Maluseo and I would also like to honour our queer ancestors who fought for our rights and visibility as equitable citizens of the world. Kia ora, my name is Kelsey and I use they, them pronouns.
Noa ngata tako o te wasa Maluseo Joseph Talanoa mo ngō whāne sau kamachuchu, ma whamori posamlahi singoa, he, she, they, ma tima whitamata te I repeis la hiem singoa, mo peis la nā ta awatu se aurua la whoraka se oma se ta aurua.
Ngāia, tāsali Rejieli Sikuri, ngolehane Rotuma. Hello everyone, my name is Rejieli Sikuri and I'm from Rotuma, the same island as Joe and Tamara. I'm currently on Ngāi Tahu land, Ōtautahi. So I just want to acknowledge Ngāi Tahu tribe. Also acknowledge Kelsey and Maluseo for inviting us onto the podcast.
Ma'aya. Ōtautahī Tamara Sikuri. Moana and Oceania. Hello everyone, my name is Tamara Sikuri. I'm also from Rotumans. I'm also on Ngāi Tahu land with Rejieli. We're actually twins, so we live in the same city.
All right, thank you so much for taking up the invitation and the calling to come on the podcast, and we really do want to thank you because you mean a lot to us, and you met us and we met you at a place in our lives where it was actually quite vital that we met you too. So we wanted to actually offer you to this moment to whakapapa us back. How do we know each other? How do you know us? And how are we connected? We can go, whoever wants to go first.
I met Joe. I met Maluseo. Sorry, I'm so used to calling you Joe. I met Maluseo 2-3 years ago online. Because we're both Rotumans, so we met during the first Rotuman Language Week. We're part of the youth panel, even though we're not technically youth.
You fall.
Wait, yeah. Young at heart. But we met then. And we're... Rotuma is so small. We're cousins. Well, I always say he's my cousin. I'm not exactly sure what the actual relationship is, but I'm going to go with cousin. And I met Kelsey through Joe. Through Maluseo. They came down end of last year, I think, or maybe beginning of this year. And we spent some time together, which was really good. It was a good time to share and also learn from them. So, yeah, that was nice.
I first met Malu when I think I went up to Auckland last year. Met Malu through some of our family up there. He came over to Auntie Itu's house, and that's how I met him. And I met Kelsey at the same time that Rejieli did.
Mm-hmm. Kelsey, your side of the story?
So I was like part of my first travels down south, and I was like really missing my people, particularly Maluseo, and I had been away from my people for probably like a month and a half, 2 months by that point. And I was like, I just need my people. And I was on the west coast of the South Island. I was like, screw this. So I just like got in my van, drove Arthur's Pass over to Christchurch, and me and Malu had like this dramatic, like in the middle of the street reconnection after like 2 months. Like, we were both crying. And I was like, oh, I missed you. And I think that was the longest we'd been apart in in the entirety of our friendship, which is like 6 years. Like, the longest we'd been apart was 2 months. And it was amazing. It was just like this beautiful moment. He was like, we're going out for dinner. I was like, all right, let's go. And you guys came and picked us up. And honestly, I felt like I just felt like I was with my family immediately. It was so nice. And you guys are both like so smiley. Like, even now, you're both just like smiling and happy. And like, I don't know. I think one of you was like singing or jamming in the front seat. And I was like, these are my people. And then I was so like grateful that we got to spend more time together over those like week or so that I was in Christchurch in Ōtautahi. So yeah, it was beautiful, and I was just like glad that I got to meet more Rotumans, because I think Rotuman people are probably my favourite people. Like, I gotta say,
Facts.
you guys are pretty cool.
Bye.
Yes.
You have to be biased in this current room, because you're outdone. It's 3-1 here, so your ratios are.
No, but like, seriously.
If you don't know, now you know.
Yeah. No, honestly, it was amazing, and I just felt like I've just like gained two more cousins, lifelong cousins. So that's amazing. Thank you. And I really enjoyed that we went to the Ōtautahi gallery. And we got to share in that space, and that was the last time until like a couple of days ago that I'd been in a gallery. And
wow.
Yeah, it was amazing, and yeah, it was really cool. And I remember us all being in the big room with the gold tree, and just like everyone was kind of having their own experience of that space, and it was like encompassing, but then like there was so much space. And I just remember observing all three of you and how you were interacting with that piece. It was really interesting to see how you were each interacting with it differently, but then you all kind of came together to interact with it as a small group. It was really cool, and I just kind of like stood in the corner. I was just like, these people are cool. And I could see and I could observe your connection, like as your own beings in the world, but also like you guys as twins, and then you guys all as cousins. So it was beautiful. It was such a beautiful moment. And I'm glad that I got to be witness to that.
I forgot to say that I was like, because when I first met you, Kelsey, I had been like binging this podcast because I was like going through like just a weird time in life. Also, it was like the end of the year, you know, when you're just going on that incline. And I remember because I was working over summer. I was doing like a dispatch job, so I like had all the time in the world to just listen to something else. So I was just like hard out binging this podcast, and also because like I was missing Maluseo, and I was like, it feels like Maluseo is still here. I'd be at work, and it would be the weirdest thing because like especially after you guys left, it would be weird. Like I'd be at work, and then I'd be like laughing, and I'd expect to turn around and see you guys there. I'm like, oh no, I'm listening. Oh no, they're not here. It's a podcast. But yeah, so the first time I met you, I was like, oh, it's Kelsey.
Wait, no joke.
It's crack up.
Rejieli said that out loud as well. She was like, bro, every time I turn around, like, you're almost there.
I didn't know
And
that.
I remember one day I was like sitting in the car because I listened during my lunch as well, and I was a bit sad. Like, I think this was the day after you guys had left, and then I was like laughing, and then I turned and no one was there, and I was like, am I about to cry? Wait, what's happening? Anyway.
No, see, the first time I met both of y'all was actually, in my memory anyways, it's at the language class with Itu. So,
Yeah.
and it's like, that was the first time I actually like saw your faces, but the first time I met you physically face to face was at Itu's house again. So I guess we need to honor and acknowledge Itu Solomone for your work in the communities, but also just for embracing us. And it was so good. I feel like for me in my journey, it was so good to meet other Rotumans who are in the diaspora, but also figuring out what it means to be Rotuman in the diaspora. And I didn't even know that I needed community and I wanted community until I met all of y'all. And then the more that we're joking and laughing is the more that I'm like, actually, these are lived experiences that are real that we don't talk about enough. So that was, I would like to say that was one of the biggest, one of many catalysts that allowed me to really jump deeper into my Rotumaneity and just figure out what it actually means to be a Rotuman in the diaspora. And I guess this is where we're just going to we're going to gift it up to you two again. Which communities are you a part of? Would you like to shout out, or which communities are you adding value to, or otherwise they're actually giving you a lot of inspiration and they're adding value to you? So any communities, one or two or three or many?
Wait, I'll let Tamara start because I feel like I've spoken more than she has.
Okay. The communities that I'm a part of are like outside of our Rotuman community, which is probably maybe it's not the biggest community I'm a part of, but it feels like the one that I connect to the most because I'm Rotuman. It's probably outside of that church, my church community, and the little communities that I'm a part of in there. So, for instance, I, work a lot with children, which is something that I'm really passionate about. So, shout out to that community that looks after children within our communities. Also, I now consider myself a part of the arts community. It's been a while. I've been, studying fine arts, and I'm in my fourth, and I'm not going to say it's my final year, but I'm in my fourth year. And I'm finally starting to consider myself a part of the arts community. And I'm also, a part of, just friend groups within our community, like outside of these other ones. Like for instance, a new friend group and community that I've just recently become a part of is the House of Hanutu, which I want to give a huge shout out to. It's been a real well where I can go and fill my cup especially in these recent months, that I've come to know them. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. Echo everything you said.
Since Tamara is my twin sister, we have the same communities, except I'm not artistic like she is, like in the way that she is. So I'm not really part of any art community. I'm slowly because I'm part of the UC community, University of Canterbury. And it's my fourth year as well, but I'm slowly starting to feel like I am part of that community, like UC Pacifica and stuff. And I think that's partially for the first 4 years, imposter syndrome, do I really belong here kind of thing. But I think my favorite community over the years has been the community I have with not just you guys, but with Phil, Helena, Thierry, and Russell. That's been can't forget Russell. Our father Russell.
I was gonna say also Father Russell.
But I think that has been a really grounding circle for me, and it's also helped a lot with my like I said, imposter syndrome. Even in the Rotuman community, I wasn't really involved until I started, our community started with you guys. So that's basically me. I used to do a lot at church, but I've slowly I wouldn't say grown out of it. I think I'm just in a phase now where I've just sort of I want to focus more on my ethnic community compared to my religious community. But that's me.
Kia ora. Thank you both for sharing. It's interesting to see what overlays there are and where you're kind of creating your own identities as well. And we're just curious, why is community so important to you? Like, what is the connection there for you individually and potentially together? Like, are there any similarities again? Because, like, for me anyway, like when I see twins or when there's content in the media around twins, it's all like, oh, we're the same, we're exactly the same, or the opposite of we're polar opposites and there's no similarities. So I'm curious, like, as a unit, like, why is community important to you? Are there any overlays or is there difference?
I'll start. Well, first of all, I think it's important to say that I'm the older twin, so I always feel the need to be in charge. That's why I always talk first. But Tamara's definitely the wiser twin. I think because we don't look the same. We're fraternal twins, so I've never really felt that. We know we're twin sisters. Like, everyone knows we're twins. Everyone in our communities, but we've never.
Do we know though? Do we know? No. Do I bring up my grievances now?
If you don't know, now you know. But yeah, I think because we don't look the same, we don't really get lumped into, the same box all the time. So it's been a good thing, I think, for us, because we've been like we had the spaces to grow as individuals, not just as like twin sisters. That's why I've never really felt like it's a huge part of my identity. Like, it's never been something that I'm like, oh, I'm a twin, by the way, because I still do feel like my own person.
Yeah.
But I think for me, community, like, why I feel it's important is because I was raised in community. And I think it's the same for like every Pacifica culture, and even here, like in Aotearoa. And I feel like even in like Western spaces, maybe community doesn't look the same, but like Kelsey said, there's like everything starts and ends with community. So for me, community has always been like part of my identity. Like, I don't know, it's hard. Like, I think I was telling Maricel this the last time he came down, but it's hard for me to be rooted in myself without community. Like, I feel lost when I don't have community. Like, it's almost like I don't know who I am. It's like I feel like I mirror the people around me, and so when there's no one around me to mirror, I almost feel like, just a blank sheet of glass. Like, you're like that you can still look through. So I think that's why it's been so important for me. And I think also because it's so important to my parents. Like, they love, being in community and, creating community. So I feel like it's just something that it's really familiar, something comfortable for me. So yeah.
Delicious.
For me, my connection to community does have something to do with the fact that I'm a twin. So I'm the more introverted one from the two of us. And so when we were growing up, for the most part, I relied, obviously because she's the oldest as well, but I also really relied on her to like make friends with other people. And then I'd just be like, okay, you're my friends too. That's how it really went for a long time, because growing up because our parents are in ministry, we moved around a lot. Like, I'm not joking, by the time we were like 18, we had counted that we'd moved around 22 times. And so for an introvert, that was really hard, like having to move all the time. We changed schools about 5 times, and this is, prior to going into tertiary education. And all of those changes, you obviously have to like make new friends. And I didn't know how to do that. That just wasn't something that came naturally to me. So like every time I'd see Chell make friends, I would just, like make friends with those friends. Until like, I started to get older. And we moved here, and that was the first time we had to go to, tertiary. Here we had to go to 2 different ones. And that really was a struggle for me, because I didn't know how to like make friends without but then, I just like sort of try to make friends the way I saw her make friends. And that's the way I've learned to, build communities, by looking at the way others build community, because that's not something that really comes naturally to introverts. You just want to I'm okay in the corner. It doesn't matter whether you talk to me or not. I'm okay. But yeah. And also, part of the Rotuman culture is we're very much don't separate twins. If you separate twins, something bad's gonna happen. But then my parents they raised us to be our own people as well, as individuals. So we were never forced to be in the same class, because we fought a lot, but we were never forced to be in the same class. And I didn't realize that, this was sort of going against the grain of our cultural way of doing things until we moved to Rotuma. And, the vice principal asked which, stream we wanted to be in together. And we just said immediately, we're going in the opposite directions. And, everybody was shocked. And yeah, that's when it occurred to me that I rely on Chell to help me make friends and things like that. But at the end of the day, I have a sense of community as well as an individual. So yeah.
I think, sorry, I'm just going to jump in. I think I should have said as well, how she says that she looked at, because I'm more extroverted than she is. But I think, a lot of my confidence in being a social person stems from my ability to rely on her. Because we've been together our whole life. So I've just always known I have a friend. Even if these guys don't want to be my friend, it's okay. I have a built-in friend. So it's just giving me the confidence to be hi.
Hey, if you don't like me, someone's forced to like me.
But yeah, Tamara is definitely, and I feel if you ask my parents, Tamara is definitely my anchor. My whole life, she's always been the one that humbles me, brings me back to reality. So yeah.
That is so loving. I'm
my little tangent.
No, we welcome the tangents, please.
Please.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And thank you both for sharing, from your perspective, and then being able to, Rejieli, jump back in and share that, because, yeah, that little space of reflection has been offered more to the conversation. So thank you. And it's interesting, you already touched on knowledge a little bit, knowing, the inner knowing of you already have a friend, even if other people are nah. But I'm curious, when we talk about knowledge, that word can hold so many different meanings for so many different people. So we're curious to understand, when we talk about knowledge, what does that word mean for you, both individually?
Okay. For me, knowledge is what I don't know yet. That's how I see knowledge. That's probably how I've seen knowledge actually for a very long time in my life. That knowledge is something that I don't know yet. And, it's something that I can acquire though. Just because I don't know it doesn't mean that know it yet, or I don't have it yet doesn't mean that I can't acquire it. I have the ability to acquire it. That's the way I've always sort of, not always, but for a very long time in my life, sort of seen knowledge.
Wow.
So profound. I think, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I can't help but make fun of her. I know it's a serious one.
No, it's exactly what it needs to be.
But yeah, I think for me, knowledge is, I think, my parents, they've always been so big on education. You need to chase, not chase, but they've always prioritized our academic pursuits. And so I think for me, knowledge is an academic thing. It's, knowing not just physical things, but also knowing yourself as well, and knowing your surroundings kind of thing. Like I was thinking about it the other day, because I've been like at uni now, I've just been like at this point where I'm like, am I ever going to finish this degree? Because it's like my 4th year. I'm doing 2 degrees and I've been like, should I just finish one and let go of the other one? Because this is taking too much time. Like, do I really need this knowledge? I've definitely been in that space where I'm like, is this knowledge helpful for me? Like, I've been doing a lot of reflecting and stuff. And I've also been thinking about, you know, well, where else do I get knowledge from, like, apart from uni and, like, school and stuff? And it's funny because I've been like, well, I definitely get it from, like, my people, you know, my family, my community. But then also, weirdly, my dog, I have a dog. And my partner has a dog, so I basically have 2 dogs. And just, it's funny how you learn from them, like just observing them. And I love like going on walks and stuff and just learning from like nature and stuff. So I feel like, yeah, that's definitely, I don't know where I started with this, but that's what sort of knowledge and gaining knowledge looks like to me.
Mm.
Can you expand on that?
I'm really
a little
loving
bit?
that.
Yeah. So when you're
Go
talking
there.
about gaining knowledge from your animals, what is that? Like, can you expand on that a little?
So I don't know how to explain. I don't know if people who have animals or who, like, even those who don't like animals actually have personalities. And the 2, like Joe and Thea, they have like very different personalities. Thea's like definitely like only child syndrome. Like it runs like so deep in her. Like she doesn't know how to share spaces. Like she doesn't know how to share my attention, like just things like that. And then Joe, she's just so like wild and free. Like that's what I always think of when I like observe how they interact. Because Joe's like, she's so fearless. Like she's tiny. Like, but she like, you know, she's not cautious in the sense that like if she's running out in the fields or like in the forest, she'll just run. She doesn't care if there's like sticks on the ground poking her, which like it makes me so anxious because like we come home and then she's like bleeding somewhere because she like got nicked but she doesn't care. Like she never cries about it. She's just like go. And then Thea's sort of like the caution. Like Thea likes to be on her own. She's like a lone wolf, but Joe sort of like always brings Thea back. Like if Joe knows that I'm anxious, she'll go get Thea. And it's like just watching them has always made me feel like sometimes I'm like, man, I need to be more like Joe. I just need to go after things. Like, and sometimes I'm like, I need to be like Thea. I just need to stop worrying about who's with me and just keep going. So just like small things like that. And I think maybe because I spend a lot of time with them, I feel like they do add a lot of value. And people always think that it's just emotional, but I feel like they do like there's wisdom in them that, you know, we don't necessarily see unless we look for it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Love. There's wisdom in there, in them, and we don't see them unless we actively look for them. Wow. Yeah, that's so beautiful there. Tamara, you also spoke about, so I love the way that you framed knowledge as something that you don't know yet. And then you also spoke about conversations around that even though you don't know them yet, you know that you can still have time to acquire them. What does that acquiring knowledge look like for you?
This might like go back into my childhood and how I, learn things. So, I mean, as already mentioned, I'm studying fine arts and, I'm autistic and things like that. But the way the education system is structured and it's set up, is very hard for me to learn in. It's very hard for me to grasp knowledge in. And so, especially in primary school, I was pretty much playing catch up the whole time.
Because can I ask as well? So this is primary school in Fiji, right? So just so that
yes.
The audience, because I'm like this, so primary school here ain't the same. When I came from Fiji to here, I'm like, when are we doing the work? Because it feels like we're doing a lot of play.
Yeah.
But I just wanted just so that we're being specific. When you were in primary school in Fiji,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I had to, do a lot of catch up. That's pretty much how I spent primary school. Just, because I, learned to read late. I learned to, do a lot of things later than a lot of my peers and, classmates and things like that. And so, I don't know, from then it sort of instilled in me what knowledge looks like. It's things that I don't know, but then it also taught me that just because I don't know it yet doesn't mean that I can't get it. And that, that experience of like playing catch up for those many years taught me that it doesn't matter even if I'm behind, even if I'm, grasping things later than others, doesn't mean that I won't eventually grasp it, that I won't, eventually be able to understand and pick up that knowledge. So yeah, that's...
Sorry, can I just cut in and say, also in Fiji, we don't have we don't have gadgets or anything. It's really just whatever the teacher writes on the blackboard, you write it down. And if you're writing too slow and they rub off the other side of the board because the board is only so big, if you've missed it, you've missed it. But I think just to encourage Tamara, she always says that she's a slow learner, and I've heard a lot of people say that about her. But Tamara is she's really smart and she's really consistent, and just because I remember when we were in high school, the high school that we were at, Fiji. And this is the thing, Fiji just doesn't have the resources like we do here. We didn't have a science teacher, so we just had this random person fill in, and it was we have a lot of external examinations in Fiji, and it was so bad because the fill-in, he just didn't know what he was doing. So it was, we ended up going to externals not ready. We only had a quarter of the content that we needed to have. And so my parents decided to put us in one of the more competitive schools, academically, which is an all-girls school, ACS. And Tamara initially, are you okay with me sharing this?
Yeah.
So initially, the principal said she can't. The marks that she had, they did, she didn't meet the entrance mark. But we as a family, my parents are very spiritual. They prayed about it, and eventually, a week later, Tamara was let into the school. But then she went on to be the top of her class. And it was so quick. By the end of that year, she was the top of her class, and she stayed there consistently until we left. And so I feel when she says things I learn slow, I think she just the reality is she learns different. So yeah.
I love that. And I love that you can recognize that in her, because I feel it's so good when you have somebody else that sees, some parts of you that you don't like speaking and boasting about. And that's why I love about also my relationship with Kelsey, because in my head I'm we're always set up and geared up. I'm not going to say, nah, you're not going to talk about yourself like that. We're set up and geared.
My favorite thing is don't talk about my friend like that. When Malu's saying something about themselves that I would never say to him, I'm don't talk about my friend like that, because I think it's really easy for us to put ourselves down but not say that to other people, and to flip it and be actually, you're disrespecting yourself and you're disrespecting my friend when you talk about yourself like that, so don't do it. And I think it just shifts a little bit. And it's not something that I come up with on my own. Okay, I'm not that smart. I read that somewhere else. hard. Someone said it to me.
And then, so I'm curious. So we've talked about acquiring knowledge. With the knowledge that you've had that you've received so far, and you're receptible so far to embrace and to let it transform you, or let it become wisdom in you. How do you move? How do you wear and move the knowledge that you have right now?
Yeah, I guess, with that backstory, sort of the way, I grew up viewing knowledge and that thing, that sort of thing. When I was younger, I sort of wore it as shame, the fact that I, like Chel said, learned differently. For a very long time, I wore it as shame. But now that I'm older, and especially now that, after we moved to New Zealand, and I was able to enroll into a course and, an area of study where that better suits the way I learn, I started to realize actually it's not a bad thing, I no longer wear it with shame. I am very, not proud in, a bad way, or like, I'm a big-headed way, but like I'm very proud of especially our people and the way our people, feed into each other, and that culture of like, I'll sit at my grandparents' feet and they will feed me, like knowing that they will feed me kind of thing, or my parents' feet and they will feed me kind of thing. So I now wear it with pride, because especially since I've started studying fine arts, I've really gone back to my ethnic background, our cultural ways of doing things, and just learning so much from how we do things as Rotuman people. I've now become a person that wears knowledge with so much pride, even though I know that, I don't know that yet. Knowledge is something that I still have the same, perspective that knowledge is something I don't know yet, but now I see it as something that I can easily acquire, and I feel that I can wear it with pride, this like what I don't know yet, because I have a community around me that is willing to feed me. And when I say community, I mean not just people who are older than me, because I learn from those who are younger than me as well, because everyone can teach you something. And so, but the pride is in the fact that I know that these people will feed into me and will teach me. They're not going to be like, you don't know, why you don't know, they're not going to be, I'm not going to get that type of response anymore. And I guess that comes from the fact that I've started to wear knowledge with pride.
Wow.
That I don't no longer wear it with shame. People no longer feel like, we can belittle you and the way you and the amount of knowledge you have. Now that I no longer wear it with shame, I think that also changes the way people give you knowledge, because they now see that you will take it, pridefully, in a good way.
That's amazing. I think, people can, in my experience anyway, people can see the way that you treat yourself, because then you're also being an example for them of how to treat you. And like, it's so powerful that you've been able to, say, hey, I'm not shameful about this anymore. I'm actually really prideful, and you should be too. And so they should.
You, Chelly?
I think I'm actually the opposite of Tamara in terms of how I wear knowledge, but in terms of acquiring knowledge, I think stories do a lot for me. So like, I learn better when I like sit with people and like talk, have conversations, and like, when she was talking about like learning more about the culture and stuff, the first thing I thought of was my grandma, my mom's mom. Like, I remember she was taking us out to like teaching us how to find octopus. Like, she took us out into the reef, and that for me is definitely like a core memory. Like, every time I think of her, I think of like that experience, us going out, her like showing us, and just like at first I was like I felt a bit uneasy about it because I didn't want to see her kill it, but just the way she did it, like with so much love, do you know what I mean? And she was like, and this is going to be our meal for tonight, and the way, and she thought, like, she explained how it's cooked, but also like how she explained like, this is how you find it, this is why you go here, this is why we go at this time, things like that. And I feel like I learn best when I see someone doing something and they're like explaining things to me. Which is why I really struggled, like, with university here. Like Tamara said, when we started uni, I was at UC and she was at ARA because she was doing interior design course. And so I didn't really like going to uni because at first I was like, well, I don't really want to make friends. Like, everyone's so much younger than me. Everyone looks like, because I live, in a very white place. And so I just didn't want to, like, I hated being the only, and because I'm doing like business classes, and I'm always, like, now in my third year, I'm always the only brown person in the class, and I hate it. Like, I hate going to class and just like seeing all these white people, because I'm just like, I always feel like, that imposter syndrome, but also like, oh, well, they speak English better than me and they probably know more than me, so I don't like going there. Like, I don't like putting myself in this situation where I feel like I'm not enough. And so for me, acquiring knowledge here really is like stepping out of my comfort zone, like forcing myself to actually like be part of those spaces. And it's something like I've learned really slowly, but I think, the more I do it, the more confident I become in acquiring that knowledge, because I had to have like a really hard conversation with myself where I was like, well, why do I feel why do I feel this way? Like, I know that I'm not dumb. Like, I know that I'm smart. Like, why do I feel this way? And it, I think it comes back to, and because I've been talking to a life coach, and she just explained to me how like a lot of the pressure that we have in our lives we put on ourselves. And I never realized that, like, a lot of because I have like such huge expectations. Because for me, it's like, if you don't get an A, what are you doing? And so for me, like, once I feel like I'm not going to get it, I just like give up, because I'm like, what's the point now? And so, yeah, just knowing like that, sometimes we do put ourselves in awkward situations. So and I think that's why I've been like down lately, because I feel like really uncomfortable right now, because I'm like forcing myself to be in spaces that I don't feel comfortable in. But it's definitely like a learning curve. And I think, in terms of wearing knowledge at this point in my journey, I feel like the more I learn, the more I feel like I need to learn more, because it's just like, oh my gosh, like I learned this much, and I'm like, damn, it's so much bigger than that. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like the more I learn, the more I feel like the less I know. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just like, so I think, and in terms of like how I move with knowledge, I definitely I really struggle with like sharing my knowledge, because I always feel like I'm not articulate enough. And especially here, because I always feel like, well, first of all, when I code switch and I use my Fijian accent, when I do that, people are like, what was that? Because they don't really understand, like the accent that I am comfortable speaking. But when I code switch to sound more, I don't know, more New Zealand, more Kiwi, I always feel like, damn, that's not me talking. Like, I feel like a fraud. I'm like, who is this woman talking? And so I hate I hate having to share the knowledge, or just pass it on to other people. But I think I've slowly learned that, because I learned through stories, so I just tell stories now.
Correct,
so
yeah.
I think that works for me.
And I also really wanted to ask in this moment, how important is Rotuman knowledge to you at this moment in comparison to, well, just how important is Rotuman knowledge to you? Because you touched a little bit on it with Grandma's gifts, Tēfakhanisi, your bola horoka, so the gifts that she was able to unpack and share with you all. But so I wanted to extend a little bit of that. How important is Rotuman knowledge to you too?
I try to pull my rank, and I pointed and she pointed back.
For those that are just listening, they're both just pointing at each other. Being like,
Yeah.
There you go. Very good.
I think, and I think I've said this, when we had the table talk, I think for me, Rotuman knowledge has become more important now that I'm here. I think it's one of those things, that proverb we had earlier, we don't really know its worth until the well has run dry. So I think it's one of those things that when I was there and fully immersed in it, it was like, oh, well, it's there. I think we can take things for granted when it's just there. So now, the less I have of it, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, it is such an integral part of me. So I feel like when I look back on, because we used to go home for Christmas, which is something I think a lot of Rotumans do, like, especially those who don't live on the island, going back home, like, for Christmas is, like, such a highlight, because it's like, oh, we go spend time with all our family and, like, have all this fun, but I never really realized how much knowledge we do acquire while we're having all that fun on the island. And, like, and in those moments, it never feels like something important, because it's just like, okay, yes, but when's the next whara kind of thing. So I think, and for those listening, whara is like how do I explain it? Like traditional dancing and singing. It's like, it's wholesome partying. Is it partying? I don't know how to explain it.
No, you need to come and experience it. That's all you need to know.
It's one of those things.
If you haven't experienced that, Kelsey, we're taking you. You're gonna experience that.
But yeah, so I think, like, definitely, like, not having just, like, that access, that easy access has made it even more important for me now, because now I'm like, well, because I think also because I'm coming to that phase in my life where I'm like, okay, what am I going to pass down to my children? Like, I need to start collecting things, like, that are valuable that I want to give them. And so now I'm like, next time I go to Rotuma, I'm going to be intentional. I'll learn how to weave a mat. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, yeah.
I'm similar to Chel in the sense that, when we moved here was when I started to really value our knowledge as a Rotuman people. And this is why I shouted out the House of Hanutu earlier, because, I gain a lot of knowledge from there, especially in terms of our Rotuman arts and, the boundaries that it's pushing at the moment. But yeah, it's always been really important to me, our Rotuman knowledge, especially after we lived on the island. So we weren't born in Rotuma, but we moved there when we were still kids. And after we moved back to Fiji, after that, living on the island, it's when I realized, what, I'm really proud to be a Rotuman. And I remember the feeling of, walking on our land and knowing, like, I don't know how to explain this, but like as a woman walking on that land and knowing that it's mine. And that I have because in the Rotuman culture, for those who don't know, we have equal rights to the land, both men and women. So I can claim land from both my father's side, and I can claim land on my mother's side as well. I have, equal right to both land. And just knowing that, when I learned that while we were there on the island, and when I came to know that, I really felt empowered by that. And that was when it hit me, what, the way we carry knowledge as a people is very important to me. And so since then, I've always, valued the Rotuman knowledge. But yeah, especially when we moved away from the islands, and especially since COVID hit and we haven't been able to go back, because we were supposed to go back the first year that COVID hit. That knowing that we can't go back was when I really started to like, oh, you know what, like the proverb that we read to open. And I also came across a proverb in my research this year, Os Ulnu Mauena, which means that we can't see, when you leave the island shores, you will no longer be able to see the coconut trees on the island. After a while, as the boat or the plane gets further away, you won't be able to see it. It'll get smaller and smaller in the distance, and you won't be able to see it. And I when I came across that Rotuman proverb, it really reminded me that I no longer have that physical connection to our knowledge, but I still embody it. And so it's still really important to me that I don't just embody it, but now that I teach it, and I also learn from the other Rotumans that I still have connection with, which is why I'm very grateful for the internet and for virtual spaces like this where we can still learn and gain our Rotuman knowledge.
And thank you for being so generous with your shares, because it's something that's really important to me, right? Like, to me, when I think about Rotuma in proximity to Oceania and the Pacific, I'm like, Rotuma's unique lens and how they experience the Pacific is a recipe and an ingredient to the recipe of Oceania and Moana Nui a Kiwa. And when I think about it in proximity to the globe, the world doesn't experience and doesn't know how to experience the ecosystems and the networks and everything like that from a Rotuman lens. So I feel like for me, as someone who's Rotuman, the most loving thing I can do is express my unique gift to, one, the Pacific, but two, the world. And that's something that I feel like it empowers you. And for me, it really rekindled some of my ambers, going off of one of this season's podcast guests, Bridget. It really helped me understand that there's a unique Tēfakhanisi, there's a unique gift that I'm supposed to bring through. And if that gift is to bridge people, that's my thing. To me, I'm really comforted with Te Ao Māori as well, because they've helped me ask questions that I would have never asked of a Rotuman myself. Because, it's like when there's critical distance involved, you're always feeling like there's not enough. Should I be asking this question as a Rotuman? And on what authority do I ask this question on? And then I realized, I'm like, no, this is not a conference call. This was my conversation that I need to bring forth. But because it's a Tēfakhanisi, it's like, to me, I think we've had many conversations about this. When it's a gift and it's a gift from your heart, you need to learn how to wrap it. And I feel like that's still my journey and my knowledge conversation is I'm learning how to wrap my Tēfakhanisi so that it becomes an invitation or a reminder. Otherwise, I'm just throwing it at people being like, hey, you have a Tēfakhanisi, use it. And I'm like, bruv, those radical activists, you have a place in space, but it's not feeling loving, okay? It's not feeling like I'm empowered. It feels like I'm being attacked by your activism, which it has its place. I don't demonize activism at all, but I'm learning that for my specific unique gift, I'm learning how to wrap that up so I can offer it to people so it becomes a reminder to them or an invitation to them. And that's something that this space, and specifically Kelsey in proximity to me, has helped me nurture so much, because I'm like, Kelsey's been here through my journey from 2016 to now. Kelsey's seen the level of participation I have had within the Rotuman community. And I feel like Kelsey's a really good po for me to understand that there were times when we couldn't access our Rotuman knowledge, and it was for safeguarding. And there was a time when I used to be like, oh, I'm just not enough, or I'm assimilated XYZ. And they were true to those moments. And right now I feel like it was a protective measure, because I wasn't ready and I wasn't prideful with the knowledge that I had. And I wasn't ready to step into the pride that was already there. It wasn't something. So I feel like, going off of another conversation we had with the season 2 guest, the knowledge is already there, and we unlock it when we're ready and when we give ourselves the permission, or the timing is right. It's not something that we have to climb mountains to get. It's like, no, when you're ready and you're prideful, everything will be like, oh, here it is. Or not me crying for a whole month, being like, where is it? Where is it? I need to find it right now. Just honoring that. That was a whole season. Thank you. But yes. And I guess I'm just inspired by what you two offered, because that's literally exactly where I'm at with why Rotuman knowledge is so important, because it's like, the way that I see it, we're here echoing her voice. She strategically and purposefully placed us in these specific spots so that we can echo her voice from our unique gifts from here. We're not here to look at those gifts. We're here to figure out how Rotuman gifts are explored, expanded, elongated on this soil. And that's something that, yes, there's a lot of politics into that conversation, and I honor that. I just want to honor that there's a lot of different views into that worldview, but also, I also want to honor the fact that no one else is doing it. And in my head, I'm like, it's us. It's you, it's us, and it's also a recipe of our community trying their best so that we can start having these conversations. Do you know what I mean? I love our communities because they the more that I looked into our communities, is the more that I realized that actually I can't see it because I have to create it. I can't see it because I have to make space for it, or I have to make the room or allow people to come into that space. Thoughts?
I definitely agree. I think what I would add for me is that like one unique gift, Tēfakhanisi, that I got from the island is because our culture, we don't, like, women are valued in our culture. So I've never ever walked this earth feeling like because I'm a woman, I have less value than a man. I've always felt like, if anything, I've always felt like I have more value than a man, because that's how much we value our women. And so like I think for me moving here and like seeing that, you know, it's actually like that's not reality for a lot of other women, even in living in Fiji, because Fiji is a Melanesian country, like culture, and for them, you know, they definitely have like a patriarchal, like it's definitely the man who's more valued. Like that was something I really couldn't relate with, and I think that's something that's like made me more confident in who I am. You know, I've never had to feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say anything because I'm a woman. If anything, like I've always felt like actually I'm supposed to say something because women always say something, you know. In our spaces, they have something to say. They always have the biggest say. So I feel like that it's definitely made like it's a huge part of who I am. And like when I think about what I want to give my daughters, is I definitely want to give them that. Like there's no way like I'd ever want my daughters to feel like they're less than a man. Which is like, I feel like for me, it's something that I'm learning, like, because it's a good and a bad thing. Because like my partner, Ryan, he's very, he's not timid, but he's definitely like, you know, like I always say I wear the pants in this relationship, but it can be like quite a toxic thing as well. Because sometimes I just like bulldoze all over him. And I feel like in a lot of spaces, I tend to be like, no, what you're saying doesn't matter because you're a man. So I feel like it's something I need to learn, like, you know, even though it's a good thing, it's something that I need to learn to tone down sometimes because it can definitely get toxic. But yeah.
Love that, Shia.
Yeah, for me, you know, one Tēfakhanisi that I have, one gift that I have that sort of really pushed me into, you know, how to, you know, navigate being a Rotuman in the diaspora and how to, you know, maintain our knowledge and, like you said, create those spaces in our community that, you know, needs to be created. I remember when I was in second year here at UC, the research project that I did, it wasn't my intention to do that one, but then I quickly, in the very beginning of the research project that I was doing, I wanted to, you know, connect with other Pacifica students at the School of Fine Arts at ILM and do a project with them. And and I knew that, you know, like as a Pacifica person coming from the culture, I knew that, you know, we'd be able to like easily come together. It wouldn't matter whether they were, you know, in years senior to me or in the year below me. We'd just be able to come together and do a work together. And I remember being really like excited to go and find some Pacifica students and didn't find any. Yeah, and so that was when it really, you know, occurred to me that, look, I gotta be able to create this space, or, you know, push the boundaries in this space so that we can create opportunities for conversations to be had in places where they're not being had, you know. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I'm doing, not just in the art community, but also like in terms of our Rotuman community. I want to make sure that other Rotumans, and I'm not just talking about like younger generations, I'm talking about like just Rotumans in general, know that if they have a Tēfakhanisi, it doesn't matter if everyone else that's in that space is not Rotuman, they still have something to bring to the table. They're still able to, you know, pave the way for other Rotumans to be able to come into that space. So like, you know, it's not easy. it's not easy to be like the only one or the first one. That's never easy. To like break the ice. But then, I want to look back and say that, hopefully other Rotumans will be like, yeah, I can do this too. And yeah, I can have this conversation with you and I can confront these issues, not because I'm the minority, but because I just have a voice, and I have knowledge that I can bring to this table as well, kind of thing. Yeah.
Not.
It's really beautiful. And I think that's a really nice segue into our last question for today is, what are those conversations that aren't being had? What, like for you, each of you, what is in your whākī? Like, what are the things that you want to be talking about, either in the Rotuman community and any of the other communities that you've mentioned today? Like, what do you want to be talking about that maybe you or others are a bit too whakamā, a bit too shy to be talking about? Like, what is it? I want to know, Tamara, what are those conversations that you want to be having that aren't happening?
Sure. I mean, we've already touched on, my backstory and how learning in primary school was quite hard for me. It didn't end there. For me, learning in high school was also really hard for me. So you know how Rejieli said that we got into that, prestigious school. So I started a week after her, but I started 3 weeks late. And 3 weeks after that, we had midterm exams. Because it was a very competitive academic school. So they were constantly having assessments to see where the girls were at. And I remember when I started, I was, informed that this is what's going to happen in 3 weeks' time. And I actually was given the, how do you say it? Like, this is how it's going to happen. You're here by trial. If you don't pass in the first term, you're out. Like, find another school to go to. And I know that for my parents, it was very hard for them because they didn't want us as twins to be separated. Like, they were fine with us being in different classes and things like that, but they didn't want us to just like, oh, one's going to go to that school and one's going to go to that school kind of thing. They weren't ready for that yet. And I know that we weren't ready for that yet. Like, I wasn't ready to be in a different school to chill. And so I remember just, right, okay, I'm just going to have to knuckle down and do what I've always done, I've got to find another way. So the way I learned how to read, I didn't know how to read until I was in year 4. At the end of year 4, I remember the teacher coming around for the exams, and I still had to ask her to read out my questions. Then I would tell her my answer and she would spell it for me so that I could write down my answers. That's how I passed my year 4 exams. And I was so fortunate to have a teacher that was willing to do that for me. And so in year 4, during that, summer break, I went and picked up some Nancy Drew books that my mom always talked about her reading when she was a kid. And I started to try and read. So I started with the 2-letter words that I knew and like sounded out those words and try to match it to 3-letter words. And, that's how I learned how to read. And that's something that I want to like make sure that other children, and this is why I have a passion for working with children. Like, I want them to know that even if they learn differently, they can still learn, And even if they find even if other people say that, you don't have a place here, that they still, they shouldn't have to feel that way inside. Because that was something, and that's why, I said earlier, I carried knowledge with shame because, for all of those growing up years, there were a lot of adults in my life that would say like, oh, you're not smart enough, kind of thing. And that was a real struggle for me. Sorry. And that was a real, that was something that I, from then never wanted another child to feel. Like, I don't want children to feel that way. So yeah, I guess that's a conversation that I want to have with people, that just because, and our and this is not just with the community that I have with children, but this is also with our Rotuman community, because we have a very strong culture of making fun of each other. And it's like, it's good because we're able to laugh through some of the difficult things. And it helps us, not just break down all the time. We can, find a different outlet for it, like by laughing and learning a way to like be happy. And which is something I appreciate about the culture, but then sometimes it goes too far. We laugh about things that actually we shouldn't laugh about this. We should help each other with this, and that's like with when I remember when I went to Rotuma, and I remember the boy. There was two boys sitting behind my sitmate and I, and they said, "Oh, can you help us with this because you speak good English and you can write good English, and we can't." And I remember telling them, "You speak Rotuman and I can't. Do not be ashamed of the fact that you can't speak English because you speak your mother tongue. You teach me how to speak Rotuman and I'll help you with your English." But I also told them I just recently learned how to read, so don't don't be like, "Oh, put yourself down," kind of thing. These are the conversations that I want to have with people. Like, don't put yourself down. If you're not, if you don't think you're as smart as someone, you can get there. Like, knowledge is something that you might not have at the moment, but you can get it. Yeah, you can acquire it.
Love.
I think for me, really listening to Tamara's experience, which first of all, this is the first time I've ever heard she's ever said, I don't know if she said to me before, but I didn't realize that she didn't know how to read until she was in year 4. Like, I didn't realize that was what exams looked like for her. And I think that's a privilege that I had. Like, I think that's something, because I didn't have to struggle with it. It was like, sort of that out of sight, out of mind. So it's just like, well, it's not something I struggle with, so it's not something I give time to or value. But I think that's something that's important. Like, I feel like a lot of us, it's hard for us to acknowledge our privileges. But if we don't know what our privilege is, you do know what I mean? Like, how can we acknowledge something we don't know? And I think that's why it's so important to have conversations like this and tell stories, because that's where we realize, where we sit, in proximity to others. And I think my biggest thing in our community is, I feel like there's definitely a lot of love in our community. Sometimes it feels like toxic love. Sometimes there's too much love, it's toxic. But I think one thing that I would love to see more, especially in our communities, people realizing the words do matter, because I feel like, people don't realize that the things that they, tell someone, the things that they constantly say to someone really does condition how they see themselves and how they navigate the world and stuff. And so I feel like, I think it's important to be intentional about the words you use, but also have that grace, to be like, oh, well, what am I missing? How will this affect someone else? And I think in terms of uni and stuff, Tamara's made it obvious that we all learn differently. But I think the system that we have right now really just caters to one style of learning, which is something that's I find frustrated. And, I feel like I definitely didn't have the challenges Tamara had. So imagine people who have, are either where Tamara was or, somewhere worse off. And I feel like it comes back to, just privilege and accessibility, and also being willing to go against the grain. Like Tamara said, she started with reading Nancy Drew books and, started with 2-letter words. I feel like if you're not, if you constantly just go with the mainstream ideas, I feel like you'll always feel lost, especially if the system's not designed to uplift you. I feel like if you don't feel like you fit in, create a new space, find another box. Yeah.
Fuexia se o roe horek Tēfakhanisi e mau se o hunga, mau a hei mau inia. Thank you so much for unpacking the gifts that are resonate with your heart, your mind, and your internal compass. It makes me really, and I don't know if happy is the word. It's more so it makes me feel very seen that both of you are echoing a lot of the struggles that I myself have been battling with for a long time, but also it just makes it more known, and I feel like the more that we know about these experiences is the more that we can actually, serve ourselves as well as serve and compassionately others. And I feel like that's why I really love the whākī kaupapa, but also love that we have guests like yourself that can actually come through and share willingly what your lived experience is with all of these different structures and systems that, they're made by humans who have had a certain level of privilege. And because they're not that flexible, it's like it actually allows for a lot of silencing mechanisms to come in. And it's not so much individual people's fault, but now that the systems have legacies and live to another day, it does hinder a lot of conversations that might not be palatable. And that's what I really love about this kaupapa. So thank you for adding value to this kaupapa. And also, we just wanted to give you one last chance if you wanted to shout out to anybody or any communities before we wrap up with our jingle for the day. Any communities, go. They're still pointing at each other, fam. They're still pointing at each other.
I think I'm just going to shout out Joe, Maluseo, and Kelsey. I think, when I look at all the communities that I'm part of, I think what you guys do is definitely something, like, for where I'm at now, is definitely something that I feel like is vital, like the most important thing, like these spaces. All my other communities that I'm not saying they're lacking, but I'm not going to shout them out. Just where I am now. So I feel like, so I also just want to thank you guys for, holding the space. A lot of the conversations that we've had, like the four of us, conversations I've never had with anybody else, like, and there's been a lot of points in this conversation where I'm like, am I going to cry? But it's okay. I'm a strong Rotuman woman.
No, you're done. You're done.
But I think it's really important, like spaces like this that bring in conversations that, are like on the outskirts, like the whākī. Like, I feel like I've never like seen any space like this until, and maybe it's because, and I wouldn't have seen it like if I had known Maluseo and like eventually Kelsey. So I feel like this is definitely a space that needs to be elongated and spread.
Spread. And you, Tamara?
Just wanna reaffirm what Chel said. And I guess I also wanna shout out to my konohonga, my whānau, my parents and Chel and my two younger siblings, because a lot of that the experience that I've shared today, I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. I wouldn't have been able to do it without the knowledge that my parents and the security that they passed down to me, like for instance spiritual knowledge and like learning to pray, because that's how I learned how to read. I just prayed about it. I know I couldn't do it, and I knew at the time that I didn't have the tools to be able to learn it, and I eventually got through because I've always been surrounded by this little community of mine. Just my konohonga, like I said earlier, we moved around so much, and I really want to shout out to them because they've really carried me through, because of the values that they've given me, I've been able to like recognize values in other communities like yourselves and appreciate spaces like this. I guess I don't know if I would be able to appreciate this type of spaces and these types of communities if it wasn't for learning from this small community and this foundation that I've got in them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Like, from us, from Maluseo and I, like, we really do appreciate you coming through to share your stories. And like as a Pākehā, I feel very, very privileged to be able to be witness to the three of you in conversation. And like maybe you might have noticed that I wasn't as vocal in this episode, but it's because I don't think that my voice as a white person is always important or always needed to be inserted. So I'm grateful, and I'm getting a little bit emotional, that I've been able to be witness to the three of you in conversation, because like I know that you don't have to share your knowledge, but the fact that you're willing to come through and share it is just really beautiful. So thank you. And if if people have connected with your story, how are they best to like reach out and connect with you both?
For me,
probably. Oh, you go first.
see, I should have pointed. That helps with the cues. Well, for me, I'm real active on Instagram. I do have like all forms of social media, but I think I check Instagram more regularly than anything else. So or just reach out to Maluseo and Kelsey, and then they'll reach out to me.
We'll be your
My
middleman.
people-
We'll be your
My
middleman.
people, yeah.
Yeah.
My people too.
And you, Tamara?
I think for me, I'm very bad with social media. So the one that I've always been like forced to be on because of, everyone connects on it is Facebook. So that's probably unless you have my email address, those are the only two places where you will definitely get me. Everywhere else, like I only check when I have time.
Truth be told. No, that's good. All right, so we started with the jingle. We're going to end with the jingle, so please join me. The fuck you.
Fuck you.
The fuck you.
Fuck you.
Hey. The fuck you.
Fuck you.
The fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you very much, everybody. Ka kite.